The following tutorial is a sample video from a full course. To watch the entire course and many others, please visit Digital-Tutors.com to find hundreds of other free videos, or sign up for a subscription and experience our entire library.
In this lesson, we'll learn how to edit an image by cropping it. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we learned all about resizing and resampling our image. Now, if you remember when we left off, we resampled this image down a little bit in size and also changed the physical dimensions on it to be a little closer to the 5:7 format. And we can see that by coming up here to Image and Image Size. But we've got a problem. You can see here that we're about 7.5 inches wide, and let's say we want to print this photo on a piece of 5:7 photo paper. At this point, what we're going to need to do is crop this image. So let me go ahead and cancel that dialog, and I'm going to come over here and grab the crop tool. It's the fifth one down in my tool panel. If your tool panel looks like this, then it's actually the third one down on the left. So let's go ahead and grab that tool here. Now, there's a few options up here in the options bar we're going to hit on here in just a few moments, but let's just dive right in and draw in our crop area. All we need to do is click and drag, and you can see that I'm dragging in a marquee here, and it has a little dashed line around it. So if I were to drag in a marquee like that, you can see here that the area within that marquee looks just like the original photo, but the area outside it is actually being tinted this black color. Now there's also some grid lines here. We'll talk about those here in just a moment, but let's look at how we can resize our crop area. You can see here at the corners and on the sides there are actually some transform controls that if we mouse over these, our cursor changes to a little double-headed arrow. Now we can click and drag this double-headed arrow, and you can see that we can resize the crop area in whichever direction the arrow is pointing. And if we wanted to resize it here, maybe the side, something like that. We can also reposition our crop area by clicking on the inside of it and dragging, just like so. Now, one other way we can transform this crop area is to rotate it. If we simply mouse over one of the corners, at some point your cursor will change to this little curved double-headed arrow. And now if we click our mouse and drag, well, it looks like I actually clicked off of it. Let's click and drag with that curved arrow. There we go. You can see that I can rotate my crop area here. But, you know, let's say we accidentally rotated it and we can't quite get it back straight, and we want to reset our crop area. That's real easy to do. All we need to do at this point is hit the escape key on our keyboard. So if we hit that, you can see here that we're back to the state of the image before we drew our crop area. Alright, great. Now if we move our eyes up here to the option bar, you'll notice that we have fields that we can enter a value for width and height of our image. Now remember, we're trying to trim this image down just a little bit to fit it on a piece of 5:7 photo paper. So let's specify a width of 7 inches, and we'll type in a height of 5 inches here. And now I'm going to go ahead and draw in the crop area with my crop tool here, and you can see that the proportions are being limited to those that are basically in that 5:7 size. So we can still draw this in as large as we want, but the proportions are constrained. So we could actually draw this all the way out to the boundaries of our image here, sort of like that. And let's go ahead and drag it over here some more. Now this is all we technically really need to crop this image, is just a little bit off maybe on the one or two of the sides here, and we're going to format this image to fit on that 5:7 piece of photo paper. But what are these lines in our grid that's overlapping our crop area here? This is actually the crop guide overlay, and right now you can see it's set to rule of thirds. And if you're familiar with the rule of thirds, it's basically a system that helps you compositionally position elements that are in a position that's more pleasing within your composition here. So I tell you what, you would want your key elements in your composition or in your image to fall probably on these areas where the lines are crossing here. So if our focal point is going to be maybe her face, maybe we want to crop in just a little bit here so we can reposition her face to where it's closer to that crossing of those two grid lines. maybe somewhere right about there. I think I like the positioning of that pretty well. Now we can also change the rule of thirds to either none, or we can change this over to grid, and we can get a grid of cells here overlapping. I typically leave this on rule of thirds just because I like to be able to see this grid of 9 boxes here to determine where my focal point should fall. So we also have some options here for the shield area. That's the area outside our crop area. We can hide that or reveal that by clicking that little checkbox. We can change the color of it here simply by clicking this little box. Maybe we want it to be red. Let's cancel that. And we can also change the opacity of it here. So right now it's at about 75%. We could bump that all the way up to 100% if we want that to be a solid black. But, you know, I like that at about 75%. Those are just a few customization options for the shield area. Now, if we wanted to confirm this crop, all we need to do is hit Enter on our keyboard. So let's go ahead and do that here. And you can see here that we've cropped our image, and if we look under image size, you can see it's now 7.4999 inches, which is exactly what we're looking for, 7 by 5. And let's go ahead and cancel that here for just a moment, because I want to come over here to the Layers panel now. Now this is a new panel we haven't talked about yet. This is going to become your best friend when working in Photoshop. So it looks like a piece of white paper overlapping a piece of black paper. And if you can't find that over here on the right, you can look under Window and Layers and see it right here. So let's go ahead and make sure that panel is open. And notice here that we have one layer in the Layers panel, and it's titled Background. And there's a little padlock next to it. Anytime you open a JPEG image in Photoshop, it's going to come in looking just like this. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is unlock this layer simply by double-clicking on it. And we're going to actually hit OK on this dialog that comes up. And you can see that it changes the name of the layer from background to layer 0. And it gets rid of the little padlock sign here. Now, what that's going to enable us to do is grab the image and move it around inside our canvas here in Photoshop. So let's grab our selection tool. It's this little black arrow right here. And let's go ahead and move that around. Now, in doing that, check this out. You can see that the area that we cropped off in this image is actually physically gone. This little black and white checker pattern is the transparency grid here in Photoshop, which, you know, obviously if those pixels weren't gone, we'd be able to move this and see those. Well, we have cropped this in a destructive manner. So let me just undo that move here. Say that maybe we cropped this image and we decided, well, I didn't like that crop, or I wanted to crop that just a little bit differently. Doing it in this manner, we've actually lost those pixels. So there's actually a better way to do this. I tell you what, let's just come up here to File, and let's choose Revert. Now it's going to revert back to the last save for this particular file. So I'm going to come in here now, and before I crop this image, let's come in and double-click on our background layer. We'll hide that. And we'll grab our crop tool, and it's still got our 7 by 5 dimensions in there. And I'm going to go ahead and draw in my crop area here. Just like so. Maybe swing that down just a little bit. All right. Now, notice here there's a few options here available to us that were grayed out previously when we cropped this with the background layer as our active layer. Now, we have the cropped area. This is asking us what we want to do with these pixels that we're cropping off. We can either delete them or we can hide them. Let's choose Hide. And now when we hit Enter and then grab our selection tool, we can actually grab our image and we can move it around, and we can see that those pixels are still there. They're just bleeding outside of our canvas here, which is exactly what we wanted. Maybe we wanted to be able to adjust this crop after we've performed it. Something like that. I think that looks pretty good. All right, now I tell you what, let's see if we can't take what we've learned in this lesson and maybe combine it with what we learned in the previous lesson just a little bit. So I'm going to come over here and drag in the image that we started with in the last lesson. I'm going to drop it in this little gray bar up here at the top. That's going to open a second file in Photoshop here, and you can see that I have 2 tabs. I can cycle back and forth between them. Now, if you remember, this particular image from the last lesson was very large. If we come to image size, almost 29 megabytes. I tell you what, we can actually resample this image as we crop it. So I tell you what, let's come over here, double click on the background layer, So we can unlock that. Let's grab our crop tool, and now let's look at this resolution field. Now, if you remember, this image is currently over 12 inches wide and over 8 inches tall at 300 pixels per inch. It probably has more image information in it than we actually need to print it, say on our home printer. So let's go ahead and cancel this here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Photoshop that I want to crop this and make it 7 inches by 5 inches, but I want it to be at 300 pixels per inch. And then we'll come in here and click and drag our crop area again. We're going to leave that set to hide in case we need to adjust it. Let's just position that here. Right about like that. Maybe shrink that in a little bit. Alright, now let's go ahead and hit enter on this. Okay, so now visibly the result looks the same as what we came up with over here. Again, we can click and drag this around. We haven't destroyed those pixels that we cropped out. But let's check out the image size here. Now, we have effectively cropped in on this image, but we've also resampled it down because our image size is now 300 pixels per inch at these smaller dimensions of 7 inches wide by 5 inches high. So we've combined what we've learned in the last lesson with what we've learned as far as cropping, and we can now do all of that in one step. Now, what you want to make sure and remember is you want to save this as a separate file and not save over your original file. And let's come up here to File and again choose Save As. Now, the default file format in Photoshop, you'll notice, is the PSD file right here. Now, I recommend that when you're working with files that have multiple layers and you're planning on staying just here inside Photoshop, go ahead and save this as a Photoshop file, a PSD file. So let's go ahead and just save this file out as Lesson 3 End. Actually, Lesson 3 Finish. And let's go ahead and hit Save. And we'll go ahead and hit OK on this dialog box. Alright, I'll go ahead and include this finish file in the project files for this course, so you can open this up and play with it in between lessons on your own. So now that we've learned how to resize, resample, and crop our images, it's time to get a little more advanced. It's time to learn about some of the other editing capabilities that Photoshop offers us. So in the next lesson, we're going to begin looking at how we can color correct our images.